Belief of a man in the saying of Allah, as we spoke last time, that we in our Aqidah believe that we will see Allah Azza wa Jal in Jannah. So belief of a man in the seeing of Allah by the people of the abode of peace, which is paradise, is not correct if he imagines it in his delusions or interprets it according to his baseless own understanding, since the baseless interpretation of this seeing, or indeed the meaning of any of the matters which are in the realm of lordship, is by avoiding its unfounded interpretation and strictly adhering to the submission. This is the religion of the Muslims. So if anyone wants to interpret how we are going to see Allah Azza wa Jal in the Day of Judgment, then this is not the religion of Islam. The bottom line is that anything related to Allah, it's going to be not interpreted, not imagined, but submitted to. The words of the author, if that person tries to imagine what it is like, or if he tries to interpret it according to his own understanding, means that those who first imagine that Allah's vision should have such and such properties, so they try to interpret what's the meaning that Allah is looking, Allah is seeing that, or we are seeing Allah, we are looking towards Allah. So interpreting that, what properties is it going to be? Like when we look at how do we see, for example, the wall. How do we see the wall? Is that the light is going to go to the wall, reflect from the wall to my eye, I will see the wall. Now our vision to Allah Azza wa Jal in the Day of Judgment does not go through these properties. The light is not going to go to Allah Azza wa Jal, reflect from Him to my eye, and I'm going to see Him. It's not going to be that way. So I'm not going to interpret how this is going to happen. I'm not going to imagine how this is going to happen. Again, we said that when we speak about seeing something like the laptop, when I look at the laptop, I will encompass the laptop. So when I see it, I will see everything about it. But our look towards Allah Azza wa Jal does not follow that rule. So the way how we look at Allah Azza wa Jal, how we see Allah, is not going to be interpreted, is not going to be imagined. We will submit because this came in the Quran and that's it. Similar to other things, and then confirm such properties that they have imagined, are anthropomorphists. What do I mean by those people? Those who shape Allah Azza wa Jal like the human being or the creatures. If they deny vision based on those false grounds, they are then negators of Allah's attributes. Then again, if someone said, no, because we cannot imagine how we will see Allah, because we cannot interpret how we will see Allah, there is no such thing called we will see Allah. This is as well wrong. We cannot negate any of these, but we cannot imagine or interpret any of these things. This is the idea which the author wants to convey by the statement, those who do not refrain from negating Allah's attributes or conceiving them on human patterns are surely mistaken. They are unable to glorify Allah properly. He did not say that they are not Muslims, because that will be depending on their intention and their knowledge. If they reached that by their knowledge and intended that, no, we are not going to see Allah Azza wa Jal, then they are negating a verse of the Quran. And that's how it is dangerous. In fact, we will be praising Him if we affirm that we can know Him and at the same time deny that we can fully comprehend Him. Certainly Allah cannot be encompassed by either vision or knowledge. So this is what we affirm, that we know Him, but we cannot encompass Him, we cannot imagine Him, we cannot think about the physical way of seeing things as we look at seeing Allah. At the same time, though, he is not saying that everything that is termed ta'wil is to be avoided, nor should one not sometimes abandon the apparent meaning of a text when and if there is some dominating proof for such an action in the book and the Sunnah. So here comes two things, which is a group of people who affirmed what Allah Azza wa Jal affirmed for Himself and what the Prophet ﷺ affirmed for Allah, and started actually shaping or explaining or thinking about the properties of how things are going to happen related to Allah's seeing, for example, or Allah's attributes. So that portion of people are the ones who shaped Allah Azza wa Jal. On the opposite came another group who did what we call ta'wil. Ta'wil, which is interpretation of, for example, when Allah mentioned in the Quran about Musa alayhi salam, وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي, and you shall be made on my eye. That confirms in the Quran that Allah Azza wa Jal has an eye. Now, when we speak about this, is that eye like our eye? It has all the structure of our eye? Of course not. Allah Azza wa Jal called it an eye. But it's not like what we imagine about the eye. It's not like what we interpret about the eye. Another group started going extreme in explaining what does it mean of an eye of Allah Azza wa Jal. The other went into the other direction and started actually saying, no, Allah has no eye. Allah meant by that, you shall be made on my care. Because the Arabs pre-Islam used to use that, so I shall look after you in my eye. It's in my care. So that's where people started going into two extremes. One affirming the attributes of Allah and shaping them like the creatures. One negating the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal and just doing ta'wil or interpretation and negating the attribute that Allah confirmed for Himself. So, our rule here is to affirm what Allah Azza wa Jal affirmed for Himself. He affirmed for Himself that He has an eye, we affirm that He has an eye. Now, if the companions or the scholars came to a conclusion of having something to explain to us what does it mean in the Arabic language or the Arabic text, then we can accept that without negating the attribute in its own. Okay? So, concerning no one knows its ta'wil except Allah and those truly grounded in knowledge, there are two readings of this verse. So for some of the things Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned in the Quran in Surah Ali Imran, that in the book of Allah there are verses which are clear and there are verses which are accepting meanings, and not many people know them except Allah Azza wa Jal and those who are enrooted in knowledge. So with that verse, we need to refer everything that we have some doubts or some misunderstanding, especially when it relates to Allah Azza wa Jal, to those who are enrooted in knowledge, as Allah mentioned in the Quran. There are two ways of reading this verse. One reading stops after the word except Allah, so no one knows its ta'wil, which are the verses that are not clear. No one knows its ta'wil except Allah. Stop. And then continue. And those grounded in knowledge will say, we affirm it, it's all from Allah. That's one way. The other way is the second reading stops at the end, which says, no one knows its ta'wil, interpretation, except Allah and those grounded in knowledge. So meaning that those grounded in knowledge know the interpretation of these unclear verses, and this is why Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us to go back to them. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ. Ask those who are grounded in knowledge. Both of these readings are correct. What is meant by the first reading are the equivocal verse, the knowledge of whose ultimate reality is hidden by Allah, The second reading, however, refers to the relativity unequivocal verses whose meaning the scholars know, which is also their ta'wil. So, the problem that came from looking at Allah Azza wa Jal is the interpreting or ta'wil of the look. People negated, people affirmed. Those who affirmed, some people went extreme and started speaking about the properties of how we are going to look at Allah Azza wa Jal, and we are the people who, again, and I will repeat that, affirm for Allah what He affirmed for Himself. Affirm for Allah Azza wa Jal what the Prophet ﷺ affirmed for Him in the hadith, in the authentic hadith. We will not negate any of the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal that He or His Messenger affirmed for Him. If there is any ta'wil that has been done, whether by the Prophet ﷺ or the companions, we can follow. Apart from that, we will say submitting, and if we do not understand it, which are things that we can understand, that we will not understand everything about the essence of Allah Azza wa Jal, the attributes of Allah, then we will just submit.